Hello again, and welcome to part 2 of my Maztica campaign video for AD&D 2nd edition. Last time I talked about starting out my campaign and some tips to help my players get started and immersed in the story. In this video, I will provide more details on the progress of the campaign since we have nearly completed the first module and are resolving the final encounters. Now would be a good time to cover the party in my campaign. Darren is playing Zapoctinol, a Maztican human fighter with an Eagle Knight kit. For those of you unfamiliar with 2nd edition, you had the option to further customize a character from its base abilities by opting for a kit. The complete class handbooks all had kits, and I strongly recommended that my party select one if it worked for their character concept. The Maztica setting was built to have the characters choose a kit that helps fit into the feel of the campaign. Crystal is playing a Piet human psionicist named Jetsiri with the Beastmaster kit. Since native spellcasters are rare, it made sense for me to allow Psionicist to fill in some of the gap. She is also playing an evil alignment. Stephanie is playing Felnar, a Saurian druid. As I mentioned in my previous video, this was a homebrew race that I thought would add to the flavor of my Maztica campaign. I'm glad someone from my group decided to play as one. Luke is playing as Chimali, a Maztican human Hishna Shaper. The Hishna Shaper is a kit for the rogue class. They are one of two main spellcaster options for native Mazticans, the other being the Pluma Weaver. Cody is playing Jin, a halfling fighter with no kit. They're from Far Piet and have chosen to play an evil alignment, the second person in my campaign to choose this path. Some of you might be questioning why I've allowed someone to play as an evil aligned character in my group. My experience is playing in other groups, generally there is a restriction on selecting any form of evil alignment. The reason being the disruptive potential you can have by allowing a character that might be okay taking certain avenues that a party of good or neutral aligned characters wouldn't think of doing, such as deceit, murder, and so on. I like having the potential for someone to act as an anti-hero of the group. I also like the potential roleplay opportunities that you get when you have less homogeneous groups. I always establish some ground rules for evil characters that it's in their best interest to not betray the party that they belong to. This can be done by establishing enough of a backstory to where it wouldn't be in character to do this, or have some other control method of an NPC that helps keep them in line when they become too disruptive to the party's goals. As I mentioned in my part 1 video, I wanted to introduce my party to Maztica through the first module printed in the campaign setting, the Fires of Zatal. Just a quick mention about how I pronounce some of the names, specifically those with an X in them. I believe these were intended to be pronounced with a sh sound, as was the Mexica people who inhabited modern-day Mexico. The party was recruited by a power player in the region of the city of Ulados to find a lost artifact known as the Cloak of the One Plume in the ruins of the capital city of Neshal. Before the party left, they received a counter offer to bring the artifact instead to the native leader of the same region. A minder from each offer is accompanying the party to support their master's interest. The first leg of the journey had the party sail along the coast, which was the fastest route. They had to abandon the ship when it was attacked by a giant squid, and the boat had to return to port for repairs. The party then had to complete the rest of the journey on foot to the valley of Nishal. As the party progressed overland, I rolled for random encounters, in addition to including a few planned encounters. I had awarded experience once before the party reached their destination because I wanted them to be better prepared for some of the encounters I had planned, and first level characters have a low survival rate with what I had in store. The party had one non-combat encounter with a mysterious elder in a lone pyramid who knew far more than he should. For their efforts, they won over his favor, so he counseled them to not trust either minder of their leader for ownership of the Cloak of the One Plume. The next encounter, the party found an abandoned village where the party did have a fight with a band of orc looters and their ogre overseer. After looting the bodies, the party acquired a map that gave them a safe path and a shortcut to the Valley of Nishal. From here, they descended into the valley to a city called Zatal to locate a contact that one of the NPC minders knew, who had detailed information about where the Cloak of the One Plume was located. Unfortunately for the party, this contact was recently killed, which left them in a dangerous place and no clear direction. The party was able to coax the tight-lipped barkeep with some imported ale to talk about what he knew about the strange happenings in the area. From here, they took a brief detour to the ruined part of Zatal to investigate a home brew encounter that I added to the module to assist with the later stages of this adventure. I was hoping that my party would be lured into trying to acquire one of the 13 golden butterflies of Kotal, a predominant good god of Maztica. The party captured the butterfly, but our halfling Jin almost lost his life in the attempt. Luckily, I didn't make the encounter too difficult, but if someone did die, then the party may not have had the resources to bring their companions back to life. I don't relish having PCs die in my campaign. In my early days of DMing, I allowed total party kills to happen more than any DM should. Since then, I have matured, and now I believe there should be a risk of character death, but it should mainly be reserved for doing something very risky or stupid. After the party got the information they needed from the barkeep and had gained the rewards from the encounter I added in, they proceeded to the next destination, another ruined city called Tazat, a den of scum where captives of the new powers of the region buy and sell slaves from the surrounding areas. This is where a tabashi is being held that knows the location of the Cloak of the One Plume. The party was especially clever when breaking the tabashi from the holding pin in a remote part of the city. Using a combination of misdirection, brute strength, and magic, they freed their target and escaped the city. The tabashi, named Chioptal, helped direct the party to where she believed the Cloak of the One Plume resided out of an obligation from being saved from certain sacrifice. As the party headed toward the foothills of Mount Zatal to find a specially marked cave that Chioptal could identify as containing the cloak, some of the party members decided it was time to kill off one of the minder NPCs sent with them to help them secure the cloak. As the party set up for camp, they could hear a commotion from Ironspike grilling Chioptal about providing more details about the location of the cloak. Ironspike has been a source of angst for much of the party since the adventure began, and this was the last straw for Jatsiri. She decided to stab him in the back as he pressed the tabashi for more details. Ironspike got a sense that something was wrong right before the knife plunged into his back. The attack merely grazed him, and in turn, he drew his longsword to retaliate against the would-be assassin. The rest of the party decided they would come to the aid of Jatsiri, except for Zapoctanol, who didn't agree with killing Ironspike. After a few rounds of fighting, Ironspike was felled and then looted. Oddly, the party found a wand on his body that they couldn't discern its purpose. His weapons and armor was kept since these items were not easily obtainable in Maztica. After a brief debate on whether killing Ironspike was a good idea or not, the party rested and resumed their climb up Mount Zatal to explore the many cave openings. Chioptal couldn't remember exactly where on the volcano this cave existed, but it would be somewhere. A marking above the cave entrance would be the giveaway. They just needed to find it. At this point, I gave the party a map with the known locations of the caves marked on it. I told them where their position was and the relative position of where the caves were and the inherent risk of certain regions on Mount Zatal. If they traveled too high in elevation, they had to worry about nighttime temperature drops and a lack of food or water in the landscape. If they wanted to cross a magma flow, they had to either decide to risk expediency over safety. Since none of the party had any heat resistance, they opted to travel a great length around the volcano to avoid plunging into magma accidentally. After a few failed checks into potential caves, the party finally found the one that had the marking. Oddly, it didn't radiate heat like the other caves. Instead, it was filled with mist and had a dampness unusual from the terrain. They discovered an altar within the cave that Chiaptal informed them was for sacrifice, and to please the guardian of the cave, it had to be something that was significant. The party first set in some coral buds on the altar and smashed those, but it had no effect. Chiaptal frustratingly said that it had to be a living offer, and the party debated using Jatsiri's ocelot companion, but that plan was struck down, so Chiaptal tried to convince while also lifting the Hishna-shaped Chimali onto the altar and swore that they would not actually sacrifice him, but it would lure the guardian out and they could then ambush it. This worked, and the guardian investigated from the depths of the cave. It was a Tlalocuatl, a two-headed dragon-like beast that was a bit of a challenge for the party. It was the big boss monster in the module, and fairly quickly party members started falling to it. Luckily, a critical hit early on in the fight by Chimali with his spearcaster reduced its hit points by a lot. After the beast was felled, about half of the party was in negative hit points, and they had to receive some healing from Felnar the Druid. Another NPC in the party, Hasakdol, who I haven't mentioned much before because he was one of the least helpful NPCs ever, decided to take this moment to secure the cloak of the One Plume and additional treasures for himself. This upset much of the party who were incapacitated. Jatsiri, who wasn't, also searching in that part of the cave formation, decided to attack Hasakdol at this point. He pleaded for mercy from the party, but they were sick of him, and he was also summarily dispatched like Iron Spike. With the guardian of the cave dead, the effect it had in keeping the volcanic heat at bay was lifted, and the party had to gather up the cloak and other treasures beyond the sacrificial altar before they were roasted, as the temperatures were rising rapidly. Having exited with the cloak of the One Plume in tow, the party had to figure out what to do with it. Jatsiri donned the cloak right before Hasakdol could take it, and she wasn't interested in giving it up. She was granted flight, high charisma, and heat resistance from the cloak. After she floated above the party and talked about subjugating some of the tribal monsters in the area, Felnar decided to hit her with the whole person, and Jatsiri plummeted back to the earth, and Zapoctonal claimed stewardship of the cloak for the time being. This is where we ended. Next time I report on the party, we will be in the final stages of the module, where they must determine who to return the cloak to. Chiaptal wants to return it to her lord, and the party has two other employers that seek its possession back in New Lados, where they started the adventure. Stay tuned for the next part of this video series on my Maztica campaign. I wish you well in your next session.
I want my D&D.